Hey everyone, Whoop Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new David Byrne album, American Utopia. David Byrne, one of the most enigmatic musical figures of the 1970s and 80s, is back with a new full-length album, his first solo record in like 14 years or so, the last of which was Grown Backwards. However, David Byrne has kept himself really busy in between these two plot points. He has been working on soundtrack music, and he's had a slew of collaborations, one of the biggest of which was that great record he had with Annie Clark of St. Vincent, Love This Giant. Another project between this album and his last that has really stuck with me is his Brian Eno collaboration, Everything That Happens Will Happen Today. An album that was just this pristinely produced futuristic art pop album, which made me feel like I was living inside of a perfect, polite society where everyone wears white suits, the work days are short, the days are always sunny, and everyone takes their dog out for a walk at 8 a.m. sharp. And now David Byrne returning with American Utopia, I'm kind of catching a lot of the same themes and vibes that I was off Everything That Happens, but it delivered in a different fashion. American Utopia deals pretty deeply in the ideas of paradise and bliss and conformity, with some added nods to darkness and American politics, as well as hyper-awareness of things like body parts and the brain, a cockroach living in the cosmos of your house, and the sentience of a chicken. I read that this album was kind of a grand statement on US politics, and it also has a very kind of hopeful angle. It looks positively toward the future. If that is the case, I didn't quite get that, at least not in spades. There are some tracks on here that are very clearly political, without a doubt, but for the most part, I think a lot of this record boils down to many of the same societal critiques that David Byrne has always laced very subtly in his music throughout the years. Another familiar thing about American Utopia is that it is instrumentally dense. It is deeply groovy and also emotionally awkward, but I guess with a new, fresh, very vibrant instrumental palette. This album is a very tight 10 tracks and 37 minutes, and it's got a pretty decent batch of highlights within it too, like the tropical island funk on the song Every Day Is a Miracle, which is as feel-good as the title suggests. The intro, the verse of the song though, is pretty dramatic, builds tension very nicely, features David Byrne just calling out and waxing poetic on things like God, as well as elephants not being able to read newspapers and loving one another. The chorus is fantastically rich, as I said earlier, really feel good, and I love how he just kind of comes together with a lot of different musical shifts throughout this track. I mean, the contrast he creates on the bridge of the song has kind of a dystopian edge to it that I like a lot. The very short but heavenly Dog's Mind is another track on here I enjoyed a lot. A song that's really the most bold political statement on the entire record, as David Byrne uses the blissful ignorance of a dog's life as a parallel or a comparison to the lack of influence and impact and control that the electorate has over the powerful, over people like the president, over our politicians. The equally euphoric track Bullet reaches a heavenly peak as well, despite the fact that it's it's such a morbid song. The springy guitar leads on this track, as well as the vocal harmonies that David Byrne brings to the table, are really lovely, but the intro is pretty dark. And there are some other tracks on here that take kind of a dark turn. They're a little edgy and have some hard grooves too. The songs It's Not Dark Up Here and Everybody's Coming to My House, two of my favorite tracks on the entire record, not only because they're well produced, great beats, great bass lines, good lyrics as well. But for me, these two tracks are emblematic of just the spirit of the Talking Heads still existing to this day in David Byrne's music, but with just I guess kind of a sadder, drearier aesthetic to kind of match the social climate of today. Where this album does fall short for me though is in a few different areas. For one, the flow and the pacing of this record, it just kind of feels like a compilation at the end of the day. There's some tracks on here that in the track listing are not that great kind of pale in comparison to others, or change sounds or change moods so wildly that it doesn't really fit in with the record. The song here is maybe the clearest example of that. As a closer, as a finisher, it doesn't really make much sense. It doesn't really tie the album up all that much. It's a very intriguing song about different portions of the brain serving different purposes, but I don't know, just the instrumental feels so sterile and feels so alien in comparison with all of the rich, groovy instrumentation that kind of packs out the rest of the album. There are some points on here where I feel like the album falls short on lyrics as well, like on I Dance Like This, which to me was a moment on the record that came off kind of plain and underwhelming as far as David Byrne's language. I know he's not known for being all that flowery with the words he chooses. He's typically pretty blunt, pretty straightforward, but with that, occasionally I feel like he borders on being mundane. Like on the song Doing the Right Thing, where it feels like he's doing his best to try to, I guess, lampoon these really drab and self-absorbed tourists, but he just kind of ends up embodying those things himself on the track. A few of the vocal performances on here are a little weak, leave a bit to be desired, and occasionally the awkwardness of this record does permeate the music so much that I feel like it holds it back a little bit. Mostly on the song This Is That, which was a really syrupy, kind of unfulfilling ballad that never really truly got started, got its momentum up for me. Still, overall, it's not really that bad of an album. Generally, I think it's pretty good. It's some pretty forward-thinking art pop with a lot of interesting instrumentation, good production, good songwriting, and a unique persona that only a guy like David Byrne can bring to an album. I'm feeling a strong 6 to a light 7 on this thing. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't cry. Just leave a thoughtful comment in the comments if you're feeling full of thoughts. Over here next to my head is another review you can check out. Hit that up, or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, David Byrne, forever.